All right, we are in week 4 of our Dreamer series. We're studying the story, the journey, the life of a man named Joseph, a real man who lived in the 2nd century BC. His father's name was Jacob, and he was Jacob's 11th son. Before I get more into the story of Joseph, I want to tell you a true story that I've heard. There was a young man named Jared. Jared moved because of his new job to a new city he'd never been to before. And in this new city, he had no circle of friends yet. He didn't have many deep relationships. And so what do you do when you're all by yourself? You go to the movies by yourself. Show of hands if you've done that. Oh, you poor souls. We feel sorry for you. I'm just kidding. So here he is at the movie theater by himself, watches the movie, and his wallet drops out of his pocket, goes between the movie seats, and he leaves. Well, they clean it, and then the next movie begins, and a woman by the name of Paige sits in his seat. And during the movie, she drops her phone between the seats. She goes down to get it, and she finds a wallet. So as a good Samaritan wanting to do a kind act for a stranger, she looks through the names inside of the wallet and finds Mom, calls Jared's mom, says she found his wallet. She goes, meets up with Jared, and gives him his wallet back. Well, Paige and Jared start hanging out because he didn't have any friends. They become good friends, and in fact, they become very good friends. They begin dating. And he actually, 4 years later, proposes to Paige at the exact same movie theater in the same seat where she found his wallet. It's always encouraging to hear a story that, like a happily ever after, right? A true story of kindness, of a good Samaritan. And then it's just, the ending couldn't be any better than that story, right? Where a good deed, a kind act is rewarded in the best possible way, right? Return a wallet, find a husband. That's a pretty good deal. Ladies, start going to movie theaters, looking for wallets. See, if I knew that every good deed, every kind word, every simple act of generosity that I did would result in a reward, then I probably would never cease doing good. I would probably be doing good all the time. My life would consist of constant abundance of striving to do right. Because I would know that there's always something amazing waiting for me. There's always a prize. There's a gift. There's a reward. But the sad reality is this isn't real life. You can do something kind. You can do something generous. You can do something loving, and you may be greeted with animosity. You may be greeted with even hate. You may be greeted with something that you didn't expect or even deserve. The sad reality is that humans don't always choose the better. We don't always choose the generous, the lovely, the selfless. We don't always choose the right. Our capacity to love has been created by God himself. So I would say that your capacity to love another human is vast because God is the very definition of love. And if the very definition of love created you and created you to love, then your capacity to love is vast. It's huge. It's endless. It's boundless. It's tireless. But is that how we act? Because yet all too often the love that we give and share, it has conditions. The love that we give, it has parameters, it has restrictions, and in fact, it's dictated by situational and relational influences. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Many people are more likely to share something if they have a lot of it, or if they don't really like it that much or even need it. But to witness someone share something that is a small, rare commodity, that is priceless, beyond value to them as an individual, well, that's of the utmost generous act we can see. It's a true example of personal generosity. Have you ever found yourself, I have, in a situation or a life space where you were in some serious stuff? Have you ever been in some serious stuff, some really dark stuff, some really crazy stuff? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm really worried about what's going on right now. And it's your thoughts, your emotions, your finances, even your health. And everything about you is preoccupied with what you're going through. Everything, all eyes are on you. It's all introspective. It's, hey, I'm going through some stuff. I'm asking some big questions. I'm struggling. And so all of your thoughts, all of your energy, all of your ability is actually reflected right back on you. I've had certain periods of my life where I couldn't focus on anything or anyone other than myself. Before I graduated from my 4-year university with my bachelor's degree and then went on to grad school to pursue my master's of theology, I had a short stint at an undergraduate Bible college. I won't tell you the name of it because I didn't really like it. It wasn't a good fit for me. I was at a place in my life where I wanted to do something big for God. I wanted to give my life to God and help affect this world with positive change. So I figured where better to prepare myself for that than Bible college. So I drove 10 hours and moved into the dorms, and I attended class faithfully. I was very introspective. I was absolutely downright determined to grow spiritually, emotionally, and professionally. Yet I didn't. I wasn't experiencing the growth that I wanted. I was so focused on myself. I was striving so hard, but I wasn't experiencing the growth. I was taking Old Testament classes. I was studying philosophy of religion. I was writing essays on ethics. I was studying verse by verse through Romans, and yet nothing. I was becoming filled with more information, yet I wasn't experiencing what I was seeking, which was personal transformation. I wasn't really being changed. I was just getting more facts in my head. And I still remember this vividly. It was during a time of prayer and meditation that I felt God say to me in my mind, "You're focusing only on yourself." And I was saying, yes, but isn't it a good thing that I want? I mean, I want to be better. I want to be more. And he's like, yeah, but it's all about you. I want you to focus on your love and service for others. So the very next day, I signed up for the Big Brother program. They were offering that in the Quad, and I signed up. And the school I was attending was in Missouri. Anyone here from Missouri? Sorry about that. Okay. So I, just kidding. Kind of. So I signed up for this mentorship program, and one of the sites that asked for help, who needed mentors, was out in this rural countryside about an hour outside of Springfield. So my buddy Brandon and two other female students, our friends, and myself, we drove an hour into the sticks to mentor whoever. We didn't know who was waiting for us. We just knew that they needed some mentorship out there, some big brothers and sisters. So when we arrive, we get to this old, tiny, rickety church, this gravel parking lot, and we show up, and there's 15 teenagers sitting on the grass and like throwing the football together outside. We walk inside the building, and there's this elderly couple that are in the kitchen cooking pasta, okay? And we introduce ourselves, and they tell us that they're pastors of this small church. They've been doing it for decades, and they somehow just felt this love for the at-risk teens in their rural community. So the evening proceeded like this. Everyone came inside, and there was this long table, and this elderly couple, they prayed for the food, and we ate. Then we went into the small chapel, and all the teens sat on the pews. And then the pastor sat a stool on the stage, set a tape player on the stage, and set a microphone on the stool and pressed play. And then everybody stood in the pews and stood there and just sang along to the stool. Then, after the stool had finished, this man and his wife went on stage and they performed a puppet show, like a full-blown puppet show. Now, as I looked around the room, there's all these teenage girls with caked-on makeup, wearing extremely tight and revealing clothes. They weren't quite interested in the puppets. Then I looked at all the boys, and they were wearing mostly black with heavy metal, with like Insane Clown Posse and Tupac and like all this stuff, and they're like just looking at these puppets on stage, right? And it was at this point that I'd seen enough, and I was so convicted that I'd been sitting alone in my dorm room, studying and praying about how to impact this world while these lost and hurting teens needed a free meal. They were singing along to a stool, and they were watching puppets. Nothing teaches abstinence quite like a puppet, let me tell you. So the next week, we came with our guitars, with our microphones, our current songs. We began leading them in worship, and I began to preach some of the very first sermons I ever have in the backwoods of Missouri. And then we broke off into small groups. The teenagers really opened up and shared, and we planned fun events on Friday nights. And weekly, we would join that old couple in that kitchen cooking for these kids that so desperately needed our love. And to think, I thought the way to give and to serve and to love God was to sit all alone in my dorm room and to read St. Athanasius. That's what I thought God wanted from me. But the truth is, I was telling God that I wanted to be something more. I wanted to make a difference, but it was all on my terms. It was what was comfortable for me and what I wanted and what was familiar to me. See, the study that I did in school was important, and I still love to study, But our own personal introspection should never come at the expense of missing out on an opportunity to actually serve, give, and love the real hurting world in which we abide. So I ask you, might there be a need of this world, maybe a ministry even in our church, that's missing you? It's missing you. Your abilities, your gifts, your personality, your humor, your effort, your work ethic, your mind. Perhaps you've been preoccupied with an arena of your life while the kingdom of God is just waiting for you to jump in, waiting for you to interact and become relational. See, I believe that no excuse is too big. Let's get some perspective and recap from Joseph's journey so far. He has a lot of excuses to be introspective. He has a lot of excuses to pout. He has a lot of excuses to put himself on the sideline and say, I've been injured, I've been wronged, I have some serious therapy I need to do before I can help or do anything. He was raised poorly and spoiled by his father. His brothers hated him, assaulted him, sold him to human traffickers, and then told everyone that he's ever known that he's dead, even though he was still living as a slave in a foreign country. The traffickers sold him to an Egyptian captain. His wife would daily sexually harass him. She attempted to rape him. She slandered him and called him a rapist, had him thrown into prison, and now Joseph is in prison. He's got some baggage. He's got some ammo. He's got a lot of things to talk to his therapist about on that couch, doesn't he? But yet in Genesis chapter 39, verse 20 through 23, if you have your Bibles, you can go there, Genesis 39. We read this at the end of last week, and if you've missed any of our talks, they're all Tahoe.Church is our website, and you can go look at the Dreamer series. Verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. He remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. He gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Remember last week, it was powerful for many of us because we discussed how everyone in Joseph's life, seemingly everyone, had wronged him, had stabbed him in the back, had mistreated him, and eventually abandoned him. But the redeeming truth through all of that is that God's blessing and his steadfast love remained. That never left him. In fact, that was the only thing that made it possible for Joseph to still breathe another breath the next morning, take one more step to get out of the bed, to possibly smile or hope or dream again. The only possibility through all the wreckage and all the tyranny that others have forced upon him was the steadfast love of God never leaving or forsaking him. It wasn't God that was bringing the chaos. It was God that was bringing hope through the chaos. See, in our darkest hours and moments, it is only God himself that can get us through. So at this point, in this narrative, in this true story, Joseph has a lot that he can complain about. He has a lot, and we wouldn't blame him. We wouldn't argue. He has every right to be angry at his family. Maybe he should never forgive his brothers. He was victimized by his boss's wife. He was falsely imprisoned, although he was innocent. And all of that wrongdoing done to him has every right to preoccupy his thoughts. He could sit and stew with that venomous rage of unforgiveness. He could cling to that bitterness of everything and everyone that has been done wrong to him. He could. He's literally sitting in a prison at the moment, and he's an innocent man. You don't think that he should be screaming at the top of his lungs, beating his chest, demanding justice? He could. But he doesn't. He stops and he takes time to help and to care for others. He's the one person in prison who needs to help himself. So shouldn't he just be helping himself, closing off the world and just looking at how poor and how wrong everyone has been to him? Poor, poor Joseph, poor Joseph. Does he sulk and sit and wallow in self-pity? Does he throw in the towel of life and just give up? Does he crack? Does he break? Does he become damaged forever? The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. No. Joseph has one of the worst track records I've seen. You think your family's screwed up. Well, they haven't assaulted you, lied to your parents that you're dead, and sold you to human traffickers. He's got one up on you. Thanksgiving may be tough, I'm sure. But it's not until you're in the Egyptian prison. And still he continues to give. And he still continues to love. And he still continues to serve this world, even when you're saying, out of what reservoir? How are you still making withdrawals? There's nothing in that account of love, Joseph. How do you have any love to give? You should just be a ball of hatred and rage at this point. You've been wronged in so many ways. Why are you still caring for the other prisoners? You should be worrying about yourself, they're in prison probably because they deserve it. But you're the one innocent prisoner. Why are you helping the guilty? What we must understand is God has written you into his story for a reason. He's chosen, purposely, willfully chosen you to include you as a vital part of his plan to affect this earth and those who call it home. He chooses to redeem and reconcile this world to himself. And he wants us to be a part of that plan. But yet we tend to get distracted and sidetracked. But you have to hear me this morning. You're much too valuable for that. You're much too valuable to allow the wounds that others have inflicted upon you to keep you from being who you're intended to be. The kingdom of God must move on. It's the only hope of this world, and we allow ourselves to be damaged, cracked, and useless, then darkness wins. Genesis chapter 40, verse 1 through 23. This is our main text this morning, so hang in there. I know it's 23 verses of the Bible, but we can do it. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker offended their lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them, and they continued for some time in custody. One night they both dreamed. The cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled, so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" And they said to him, "We've had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms came out, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I placed them in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation, the 3 branches of 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as he used to do when you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you. Please do me the kindness to make mention of me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this place." Even in this phrase, he's helping this guy out. He's serving him, but he's like, "But I don't want to be here either. Like, I'm helping you, but like maybe you can return the favor to me. For in fact, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I've done nothing that they should have put me into this dungeon." When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "Hey, I also had a dream." This is where it turned a little dark. "There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." And Joseph answered, "Oh, this is its interpretation. The 3 baskets of 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh from you." There you go. That's the answer. On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearing, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But the chief baker he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. A few aspects of this small passage, this is where we're going to stick this morning, that I just want to make mention. First of all, many would say, this is interesting. Joseph is in the royal dungeon, and there is a cupbearer and a baker. Why would they both be in there, and why are they together? Well, if anyone is going to poison Pharaoh, it's going to be through his food source. And what are the 2 chief responsible people for his food source? It's his cupbearer. Anything he drinks comes from that cupbearer, and anything he eats is from that baker. So there was probably some kind of coup to assassinate Pharaoh. and he didn't know who was trying to poison him, who was in on it, so he put them both in prison until the investigation could conclude. That's probably what happened. Most historians think that way. And so obviously we think that the cupbearer wasn't trying to assassinate Pharaoh, and then the baker obviously was, because Joseph doesn't show much remorse for the injustice of him being hung. So if he deserved it, if he was an assassin, if he was a attempted murderer, then Joseph didn't feel bad about telling him the truth, right? Here's another thing I want us to look at. What was Joseph's gift from God back in chapter 37 that his brothers hated and despised? He was having dreams. Do you remember that? Like his first dream, he went to his brothers, and maybe he shouldn't have said it this way to 11 brothers who already don't like you, but he goes to them and says, hey, I had this dream, and we're all sheaves of grain, and all of your sheaves bow down to my sheaf. Isn't that a crazy dream? Then he has another dream, and he's like, yeah, there's the moon and the stars, and they're all orbiting kind of around me. I'm the geocentric solar system. It's interesting because in 37, he was having dreams. God was giving him dreams. He was the one dreaming. But here's what's interesting. This was a special gift from God of dreaming of the future and what would take place. That was amazing, amazing dream. But it wasn't until he had been through all of the grit. It wasn't until he was hated, he was enslaved, he was slandered, and imprisoned that his gift matured and grew. It multiplied under adversity. Now presently in prison, not only is he himself a dreamer, but he's now an interpreter of others' dreams. That gift just multiplied. Do you see that? It wasn't until he was in an opportunity of pain and adversity that his dream wasn't just about himself. His dream actually became a source of hope and truth and direction for others. Do we see this progression? What if the hardships, what if your struggles, what if your setbacks, the wounds from others can actually be the catalyst for your growth and your giftedness? Think about that. We try to avoid those hardships. We say, those things are going to make me worse. Those things are going to take my gifts away. Those things are going to make me a harder, a worse, a terrible, an unempathetic person. What if those very things are actually going to make you better? What if those are the very things that God can use so you can multiply the gifts that are already in you to bless this world in such a greater way? What if the darkness can actually make your light become even brighter? What if the experience of my daughter Torrin in a coma on life support has actually strengthened my faith and not destroyed it? It hasn't weakened it. Yes, it wounded me at the time, but because of that dark time, my light shines even brighter today. And I speak even more boldly, and I have even more faith when I pray. We must choose faith. We must choose hope. Choose to trust and rest in God. It's always a choice. You may not be able to choose your circumstances or what others do or don't do to you, but you can choose your reaction and you can choose your resolve. Joseph could have been preoccupied with his own issues. He could have been wallowing in his own pain and anguish, but he chose different. It says that he cared for all the prisoners in his care. He's probably the only innocent guy in there, and yet he's caring for all of the guilty, all of the fellow inmates. He's serving them, it says. It says he waited on the cupbearer and the baker when they arrived. As if Joseph was so concerned, he woke up in the morning, and it says that he saw on their faces that they were troubled, and he's like, why are you troubled? What's wrong? Well, I'm in prison for one. Like that's a good one. But he could see it. He was noticing their facial gestures. He cared about them so deeply and dearly. And yet he should have just been like so ticked about his life circumstances. He should have been angry at Potiphar and his wife. He should have been furious. And even in the midst of Joseph's darkest hour ever, he's still caring and looking out for others. And how does God respond? He expands his gifts. He blesses him even more. And you say, but yeah, he's still in prison. Well, he's blessed and in prison. Yeah, but he's still unsure of what his future is. Yeah, but he can still be blessed, even unsure of what his future is. Yeah, but his brothers still hate him. Yeah, but he can still be blessed, and God's steadfast love can still be with him, even in the midst of family difficulty. It's not one or the other. They're not mutually exclusive. Now, not only is Joseph a dreamer, now he is the interpreter of dreams. And that faithfulness to God and that expansion of dreams will take Joseph to places that he never dreamt. We'll talk about that next week. What if through some of your hardest, your most difficult, your most trying times, experiences, what if through those things God can actually make you better? God can actually increase your gifts and increase your capacity to affect and love and bring change to this world. What if? What if they're not bad? What if they're just circumstances and events and people do wicked things to one another and here you're still capable? You can increase, magnify your gifts and your light. So even though Joseph is in a literal prison, he chooses to serve, to give, and God makes him grow. In closing, invite the band to come on up. It says, verse 23, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now, if this story were focused on how terrible other humans treated Joseph throughout his entire life, then this would be a horribly depressing narrative. But it's not a depressing story because the focus is not on the injustice of others inflicted upon Joseph's life. No, the focus of this story is how faithful God was to Joseph throughout everything, throughout all of it. And in return, how Joseph never stopped. He never stopped loving. He never stopped giving. He never stopped serving. And he never stopped dreaming. So my question is, what is it for you? Has there been something? Is there currently something that has taken you out? That has become an excuse for you? And I'm not saying it's not hard and it's not terrible, but I'm saying it's still smaller than the God that we serve. Has it engulfed you in thought and worry and preoccupation? Or the arenas in your life where you could be serving and giving, but for some reason you're just not? Well, today that can change. If Joseph can still serve God and bring hope to others in an Egyptian prison in the darkest hour of his life, then so can we. One last little story before I leave you. For 49 years, a small Albanian woman named Agnes struggled with depression. Daily, she battled fear and anxiety. She was constantly plagued by doubt. Her journal entries speak often of her internal struggles and temptations. Now, Agnes was a follower of Jesus, and yet often she said that she felt attacked by Satan himself in darkness. But even with the 49 years of pain and struggle and many health complications, this small, fragile woman made a difference. Her name was Agnes, but many in our world know her as Mother Teresa. She spent 49 years in India serving and loving. She became a citizen of India. She became a teacher for the poor and the hungry. And Teresa wrote in her diary that her life was fraught with difficulty and pain and depression. She had no income. She begged for food. She experienced doubt, loneliness, and severe temptation. She wrote that she vowed to, her words, care for the hungry, the naked, the homeless, the crippled, the blind, the lepers, all those people who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared for throughout society, people that have become a burden to the society and are shunned by everyone. Little Agnes, anxiety-riddled Agnes, health complications galore Agnes, open orphanages, AIDS hospices, centers for refugees, the blind, disabled, aged, poor, homeless, victims of flood, epidemics, and famine. She talked about giving a beautiful death. She said, it is for people who lived like animals to die like angels, finally loved and wanted. By 2007, the organization she started, Missionaries of Charity, numbered 450 brothers and 5,000 sisters worldwide, operating 600 mission schools and shelters in over 120 countries. You are too valuable to sit on the sidelines. Too valuable. I'm sorry for the stuff that's happened to you. I'm sorry for the inner war that's waging within your soul. I'm sorry about those things. But don't let them stop you from the goodness of God, from experiencing the light that can shine through you by being the source of love and life and a hope to somebody around you. Don't let it win. Choose victory. Assume victory. Choose joy. Choose hope. God will give you the strength you need to pull through. Jesus has put a gift in each of us, and our world needs it. Pray with me. Jesus, you are the God of the dreamer. You are the God of the 11th son who was abused and assaulted and left for dead. You were the God of the innocent in that prison. And you made him not only a dreamer, but an interpreter of dreams. Thank you for every gift you've given to every single person who sits here on this mountaintop this morning. May you give them courage and boldness to overcome the struggles of their life. May your Holy Spirit convict them of the sin that needs to get rid of and convince them of the righteous hope that is within them.